Jai Shri Jagannath. So welcome to this class. So my best wishes to one and all. Today in this class, we are supposed to have a discussion on barriers to communication and how to overcome the barriers, information gap principle, information overload, redundancy and cliches. So before starting the lesson, I would like to inform you that in the earlier class, just in the previous class, we have discussed about the concept of effective communication. So whenever there is effective communication, then it's good. But sometimes the communication becomes ineffective due to some barriers. So that is something we are supposed to discuss today. Barriers means what exactly? Whenever the communicator or the sender gives the message to the respondent, to the receivers, to the participants, to the audience, sometimes the message that is not communicated properly. Why? Because there are some challenges, there are some misinterpretations, there are some dilemmatic situations, there are some confusions. So these are called challenges or problems or barriers in communication. That barrier may happen with any stage. As you have already known that communication is a complex system of encoding, message processing, decoding, and there are some other components. So at any stage, the barriers may happen. Give an example. Suppose encoder. Encoder is not having clarity in thought. He is not having proper objectives. He is not clear in expressions. So here the barrier happens with the sender. And the barrier may happen in the message. If the message is irrelevant, it is not content related, sequence is not there. So that means barrier happens at this stage. The barrier may happen with the decoder. That means that the participants, the audience, though they are receiving the messages, but they are not interpreting it properly. That means due to some dilemmatic situations or some confusions. And also barriers may happen with the context, in the coding system, in the environmental system. So there are different barriers or obstacles we are supposed to pass. So what are the exact barriers that can be classified into 5 categories? There are so many barriers, but overall in a nutshell, we can classify the barriers into 5 categories. Physical barriers, number 1. Number 2, psychological barriers. Number 3, semantic barriers. Number 4, that is semantic barriers. Number 4, that is cultural barriers. And number 5, that is organizational barriers. One by one, we'll discuss. First is physical barriers. Physical barriers means barriers which are concrete, visible. That is environmental distractions. In other words, we can say that physical barriers as environmental distractions. There are some distractions in the environment which mishaps the communication system. So what are those barriers? Physical barriers, examples I am giving. First one is distance between the receiver and the sender. Distance. There is distance between the receiver and sender. Then there may be some noise disturbances. Then poor internet connectivity. If this is an online class, suppose the teacher is delivering to online class. Poor internet connectivity. And there are some poor mechanical or communication equipments. Isn't it? And in a similar fashion, there are some other problems also come under this category. By the way, I am giving some examples. Suppose poor internet connectivity. Also there is poor visibility, poor lighting. These are also physical barriers. Let me give an example of poor internet connectivity. The teacher is delivering through online class. Suppose that is due to poor internet connectivity, a lot of breakups. So when there is breakups, the receivers are not receiving the message properly. Some important information may be missed. So confusions happen here. Another example I am giving of noise disturbance. Suppose in a railway station, you are listening the announcement, but there are so many noise disturbance in the different platforms. So you are unable to receive the announcements properly due to noise disturbance. So these are the physical barriers. Let's proceed to the psychological barriers. So what is psychological barriers? Psychological barriers are invisible. Physical barriers are visible, but that is environmental distractions are visible. But here it is invisible. That means psychological barriers happen in the mind. It is something internal. Stress, confusion, anxiety, anger, fatigue, lack of interest, prejudice, then that is fear towards authority. All these are psychological barriers. If you are in stress, anger, you are in mental fatigue, you are having some emotional tensions, so definitely it may be the receiver or may be the sender. If they are suffering from these psychological barriers, then definitely, as it is a two-way process, misinterpretations will be there. So sender must be emotionally stable and receivers must be emotionally stable. They must be free from prejudices, psychological tensions, so that communication can be effective. Am I right? So sometimes what happens in the class, the teacher is active, but the learners are having some mental tensions due to exam or fear phobia. Then they are not receiving the messages properly. Sometimes it also happens with the teacher. The teacher is mentally inactive. He is suffering from some stress, so he is unable to communicate properly. So psychological barriers, it is an integral part. It happens, but we have to minimize it. Psychological barriers is not unavoidable. It is one of the unavoidable facts of human existence. So, but one thing it can be done, it can be minimized, isn't it? Then we proceed to the physical barriers, psychological barriers. Then we proceed to the semantic barriers. Semantic barriers means language problems. You are misinterpreting the language. Maybe the ambiguous statements, ambiguous words, complex sentences, technical jargons. So, and misinterpreting the same word by different communities, by different audience. The same word is existing, but it is interpreted differently by different audience. So these are the problems coming under semantic barriers. And this is also the integral part, because the single word, the single message may be interpreted differently because there is individual difference. But in that point, the communicator must be clear about the language. Language is the best medium of communication. So language, while selecting the language, the audience must be kept into consideration. That language, whatever language they are using, that is the backbone, that is the skeleton of the process. So language must be proper, grammatically error-free and sequential, having the momentum. All these things must be taken into consideration. So let's come to the cultural barriers. Cultural barriers means differences in culture and social norms. So differences in your language differences, in social etiquettes, coming from different cultural backgrounds, and differences in cultural differences towards the authority. That is the cultural barriers. And the cultural barriers significantly influence the communication process. I'm giving an example that will make it more clear. For example, sometimes teachers' gestural and postural movements is appreciated by some of the learners, but it is not approved. It is not appreciated by some of the learners. For example, suppose while a learner gives correct response, then the teacher is to reinforce the student by patting or by smiling or by laughing or by nodding the heads. Sometimes the learner doesn't approve it, and some learners also approve it. So this is cultural differences. And also that is direct eye contact, direct constant eye contact. It is appreciated by some of the learners, but it is offensive in some cultures. Why the teacher is looking fixedly, so it is offensive. So these are the cultural differences. So we should go beyond the cultures. In the world of globalization, we are having one culture, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So that is something we have to think of. By the way, next, organizational barriers. There are some barriers coming frequently in the organization. So what are the organizational barriers? Complex bureaucratic procedures, filtering of information by the managers, and also some improper channels of communication and delay in communication. Mostly the organizational barriers, the most important factor of organizational barrier is delay in communication system. What happens many times in organization system, the bureaucrats or the higher authorities, they expose the informations, but they are not taking the constant feedback from the respondents, from the participants. That system becomes delayed. Once the feedback system is delayed, means communication is ineffective. Communication cannot be successful, and the delay in communication mostly happens in the institutions by the higher authorities. So that is why it is called complex bureaucratic procedures. By the way, this is all about the barriers of communication I have discussed. Then definitely the next step will be to overcome the barriers. So what are the barriers we have known? That in that similar fashion we can overcome physical barriers, we can distract the environmental distractions, we can remove the environmental distractions, we can give constant sustainable feedback. The constant sustainable feedback is mostly required, and giving simpler language and logistic presentation of the facts, and what are the semantical differences that we have taken into consideration of, and also looking towards the psychological stability of the learners, psychological factors of the learners. If we are taking a look towards, also we can also have an analysis of the organizational obstacles what are supposed to face. So that things if we are considering, then definitely our barriers can be eliminated, our communication can be more effective. Then comes to the concept of information gap principle. What is information gap principle? In this point, three things coming. One is giving information, one is new information, and one is balancing between the giving information and new information. Please be careful what I am talking about. Three steps here. Information gap principle. Giving information, new information, and balancing the new information and giving information. So what is giving information? Let's understand. Whatever concept communicator is sending to the learners, already some amount of existing knowledge is in the brain. Some pre-knowledge is already existing. That is to be revitalized. That is to be linked. That is to be recapitulated and linked with new knowledge. That means, suppose the teacher is to teach gravitational force. So some amount of knowledge of regarding gravity the learner is having in the mind. Just the teacher is to then explain the gravitational theory of Newton. So that is something new information is to be given. So whatever topics we are teaching, already the existing information, some amount of existing information is in the brain of the learners. Just we have to understand it and we have to link up it with the new information. That is called relationship between old knowledge and new knowledge. But one thing here to be considered, if constantly the interviewer or the communicator or the teacher, whoever is communicating, if he is constantly repeating the old information, that means already the information is in the brain, existing in the brain of the learners. If he is constantly repeating, then what happens? The charm is lost, the momentum is lost. Particularly the brilliant learners, they discard from the process, they reject the lecture sessions. So we must have some new innovations. They are having the curiosity, what new things the teacher is teaching, what new innovations, what new concepts. So we have to maintain a balance between the existing information and the new information. This is called balancing, and balancing is mostly required. Innovations are also, the new information also should not be overloaded. So there must be balance. In this way, information gap principle must be taken into consideration by the communicator. So next, let's come to the point of information overload. That means when the information is excessive, so overloading is there. So information overload is an obstacle, is a major obstacle. So why it happens? Because this is the day of digitalization. Continuously, that is explosion of informations. Lot of informations are exploded due to rapid advancement of technology. Continuous advertisements, continuous messages, continuous noticing, all these things happening frequently. Then excessive data available on the online regarding a particular concept. then lack of organization of informations, and then lack of prioritizations. That means particular informations are not prioritized. The learners are unable to get what the particular concept is. They are getting a lot of informations, so they are unable to prioritize what is important, what is not less important, what is more important and what is less important. So this happens, for example, at the time of examination, the learners are facing such problems. To get a single concept, they are searching through online, the Google. In this Google, the same concept is presented by different persons in different ways. So the learners are in confusion. They are searching the emails, they are searching the YouTubes, they are searching different channels, and they are getting different informations. Particular ready-made materials are not available, so they are overloaded with informations. As a result, there are some effects of information overload. So what are the effects? Confusion. First, confusion, because lot of materials, lot of data available. Then stress, as a lot of data is there, stress will be there, fatigue will be there, interest will be lost, momentum will be lost, then productivity will be lost, concentration will be lost, poor decision making will be there. So you have to manage those things. So how to manage? Keynotes must be provided, summarizing, hints must be provided, then avoiding the unnecessary details, then presenting the information logically, also presenting the informations in smaller sections, smaller segments, so that objectivity will be ensured. Next, let's come to the concept of redundance. What is redundance? Redundance means unnecessary repetition of a word. That is redundance. Phaltu. So unnecessary repeating the words, it creates boredom in the class. Particularly the brilliant recipients, they are being bored. Why? Because the particular word is repeated again and again. For example, some examples I am giving: pre-gift, final outcome, advanced planning. So that means the same, each and every student must submit their notes, each and every. So same word is repeated again and again. The meaning is same, but the word is repeated. So these are the examples of redundancy. Unnecessarily we are repeating the words. This loses the momentum of the class. Then what happens? Then comes to the cliches. Cliches means sometimes, many times, what happens? A particular word is repeated. Particular word or phrase or sentence is repeated by the concerned communicator again and again. So what happens? Originality is lost. Then confusion is there. Then professional point of presentation, professional ethics is lost. So that is unnecessarily. For an example I am giving, what teachers, I have seen some teachers, let me see what happens, I think so, like that, they are using it many times in the class. So this is the originality is becoming lost, momentum is becoming lost, and professional point of presentation is lost, accuracy is not there. So by the way, these are the points coming under cliches. So maybe cliches, maybe redundancy, maybe information overload, information gap principle, barriers of communication, how to overcome the barriers. All these points must be taken into consideration before the communicator is starting the communication. If all these points, he has a vigilant eye, he has a vigilant planning before communication, definitely whatever message he is transmitting, that will be interpreted properly, and communication process will be meaningful and successful. This is how my discussions regarding the barriers of communication, how to overcome the barriers, and information gap principle, information overload, redundancy, cliches, all these things I have discussed in nutshell. If any problems or confusions are there, you can ask me or you can give your constructive feedback. Accordingly, I'll plan my next lesson. Thank you all. Jai Sri Jagannath.